Earlier this year, I attempted to create a 20-gallon long aquascape for these 6 Neolamprologus multifasciatus, or multis, that my coworker Zenzo gave me. And today it looks like this. So let's talk about the pros and cons I've learned since keeping this fish for the past 6 months and whether or not they're worth it. Now, Zenzo mailed me these fish from his personal collection at a time when next day shipping was ridiculously high. So I would say the cost and the stress of sending live fish through the mail was just like straight up not worth it. And actually, a few months later, I actually happened to see them at my local fish store. Dope. And I think they're currently retailing about $15 to $25 each, which is still really high if you want to get a group of 6 of them. So maybe if the cost is like lower, or if you're able to get them on the cheap from a local aquarium society like auction, yeah, I would still consider getting them. Appearance-wise, they don't have a lot going for them, in my opinion. I mean, yes, they do have that really pretty blue eye and that classic cichlid shape, but otherwise, that light gray body with the vertical striping doesn't really contrast much with the light color substrate I have them on, which is aragonite sand. So, you know, of course, we all know that I'm not getting these for their appearance though, but for their awesome behavior. Where to start? I would say they were a little bit shy at first. In fact, they kind of hovered around their shells, didn't seem to do much. But then as the population increased, they became more and more outgoing. And now you can see they're out all the time. So I guess it's as the adage goes, the more the merrier. They are, of course, territorial, you know, guarding their shells and their babies, but not too aggressive. Like I've seen them go after each other, but not a lot of actual fin damage resulting from that. Definitely lots and lots of construction. Like they're constantly, all the adults are taking these giant mouthfuls of sand or whatever debris and then spitting it out elsewhere where they choose. And in fact, for most of the time when I've owned this tank, they had this giant hill on the left side that blocked everything from view from the front, which is why I did some redesigning of my own, which we'll talk about in a second. But the surprising thing to me was I knew the adults would do a lot of construction, but I had no idea that juveniles actually, they can't pick up very much sand, so they'll pick up 1 grain of sand and then spit it out. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're already getting into interior decorating. So I thought that was super cute. As for food, I think they prefer mostly slowly sinking foods that eventually end up on the ground. But as you can see, I just fed them. And so they have been trained to go up to the surface, and really they'll eat almost anything. So I kind of rotate them through a diet of frozen mini bloodworms, brine shrimp, and daphnia, prepared foods such as freeze-dried versions of those, community pellets, fish flakes. I mean, they'll eat anything. It's really the fry I'm mostly concerned about, where they prefer the tiny foods that will kind of gently waft into their shells while they're too small and not brave enough to come out. So this, I just fed easy fry and small fish food, really any kind of powdered fry food, Hikari first bites, rapashi gel food in its like raw powder form, as well as frozen rotifers, live baby brine shrimp, all of that they'll be happy to eat. I would say once they become juveniles, yeah, that's when they'll become braver about leaving their shells, and then they'll eat just like the adults will. The adults tend to, I would say, hog all the food. So again, that's when the smaller foods spreading around the tank really, really helps with their growth. As for breeding, I think I have 1 alpha male and 5 females, or maybe there's a beta male hiding in there somewhere, but it's pretty much like live bears, at least in my experience. You just add water, food, and in their case, shells. I've never actually seen them do the deed, but basically, apparently the female will lay her eggs in a shell. She'll kind of do this shimmying courtship dance to the male, entice him in. He will fertilize the eggs, and then at that point, he's kind of done, and she is mainly the main one responsible for defending the eggs and the fry as well once they come out, once they hatch and are starting to eat, which is really, really cool. I think for me, it was about probably a month after I first got my adult / older juvenile fish from Zenzo, and that's when I saw my first batch of fry. And they were probably there even earlier, but again, the population was so small that they were mostly staying within the shells. But I can't even imagine the excitement and joy I felt when I saw this cloud of baby shell dwellers just everywhere. It was like so amazing. And yes, the moms will defend their fry and their batch of shells, that area, from other moms and the dad. So try to keep the shells kind of further apart as far as possible, just so that they feel kind of more comfortable and there's a little less bickering. Now, because they don't like to predate on their own young, I was really worried about population control, because like, what happens if I make hundreds of these things and then I don't want to flood my local market with shell dwellers, because I feel like they're not that popular of a fish compared to guppies, let's say. And what do I do with all these extra fish? But really, it ended up being the case, kind of like pest snails, you hear of that, where the population stabilizes once you only feed a certain amount of food and the population will grow to that amount, right? So when there's not enough food to go around, I think the adults are less likely to breed, and then not all the fry are going to survive because they're going to be outcompeted by the adults and the juveniles going after the food. So once the juveniles grow bigger and then I net them out and give them to my local fish store or whatnot, then the adults are more likely to breed again, the newborns, more of them are going to survive, and the cycle just kind of continues on and on. Now, probably what all of you have been waiting for me to talk about is what in the world happened to the Aquascape? So I clearly underestimated their construction abilities. Like, they weren't strong enough to move the heavy rocks themselves, but they would dig near and then like right next to the rock and underneath them, and then that would cause the rocks to shift and sink and then move, basically. And so what I decided to do is take all the rocks, put them in the back of the tank, and then really bury them all the way to the bottom, touching the glass of the tank, just so now they can't dig underneath and move the rocks that way. And that's why all of the rocks right now look like they're a lot shorter than they were before, but hopefully that will prevent them from moving the rocks again. Secondly, I really didn't like that giant mountain of sand on the left side that was blocking my view. And that's because I had on the left side of the tank some shells in the back, so they would dig around that and spit up all the sand in the front, versus on the right side of the tank where I had the shells in the front of the tank, they spit the sand toward the back of the tank. So that's why I ended up moving all the shells so they're in the front of the tank, and hopefully that will prevent any more visibility issues. I'll let you know. As for the plants, all of my beautiful floating water sprite died, and I think they just didn't like the high pH and GH and the conditions of a Lake Tanganyika cichlid. And so when they melted, I got, an infestation of blue-green algae, which I ended up having to treat in this other video. But yeah, I ended up just taking everything out, and then I put pothos in it, where the stem and the roots are growing in the water, but then the leaves are outside of the water. So then I didn't have to have the aquarium light on as often, and that meant a lot of the algae in the tank ended up dying, which was really good. I've recently started putting in some of the excess red root floaters from my 20-gallon high into this tank, so I'll let you know how it goes. I definitely have enjoyed the challenge of owning my first ever African cichlids ever. And then now that I've kind of rearranged things a little bit, hopefully now I'll actually be able to see them and enjoy all their quirky little behaviors. If you missed how beautiful this tank used to look, definitely check out the previous video over here. Otherwise, take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.